My mom and sister started bossing around in my house and rearranging it, so I told them, "Hi Reddit. My name's Alex. I'm 38, single, and I just bought my first home." You'd think that'd be cause for celebration, right? Well, buckle up, because what started as a dream quickly turned into whatever you want to call this mess. I'm looking for advice, or maybe just someone to tell me I'm not losing my mind. It all started about a month ago. After years of saving, working overtime, and living in crummy apartments with paper-thin walls, I finally took the plunge and bought a house. Not just any house. It's a fixer-upper with potential, or, as my real estate agent tactfully put it, a canvas for your creativity. It cost me $320,000, which I guess is a steal considering how insane the market is. From the outside, the place looks charming. It's this old Victorian-style home with a wide porch and a small yard. But the charm ends the second you step inside. The kitchen has these awful dark green cabinets that look like they haven't been cleaned since the 70s. The tiles on the floor are cracked, the walls are peeling, and there's this musty smell that no amount of air freshener can mask. Still, I saw potential. I envisioned bright, open spaces, new floors, and a kitchen worthy of a cooking show. The first week was chaotic. My buddy Mike helped me haul boxes, and my sister Emma came by to critique every decorating choice I hadn't even made yet. While we were unloading the U-Haul, Emma pointed out a weird detail. The front door was heavier than any door she'd ever tried to open. "Feels like it's made of lead or something," she said, laughing. I brushed it off. It's an old house. Things are quirky. Later that day, while unpacking in the kitchen, I noticed something strange. One of the cabinet doors wouldn't close all the way. I thought it was just warped wood, but when I looked closer, I realized there was a tiny piece of paper wedged inside. Curious, I pulled it out. It was a faded note with barely legible handwriting. "Do not open the cellar." I laughed it off. Classic horror movie vibes, right? Except the house didn't have a cellar. Or at least, I thought it didn't. Fast forward to day 3. I was scraping wallpaper in the dining room when my scraper hit something metallic under the wall. I peeled back the paper, revealing a small, rusted door embedded in the wall. It was about 3 feet tall, like something out of a fairy tale. My first thought was, holy crap, did I just find a secret room? I texted Mike and Emma immediately, and Mike was the first to respond, "Bro, don't open it. Haven't you seen any horror movie ever?" But of course, I opened it. I mean, who wouldn't? Behind the door was a narrow staircase leading down. It was dark, damp, and smelled like mold. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made my way down. The stairs led to a small, brick-walled cellar. It was empty except for a single wooden crate in the corner. The crate was nailed shut, but I managed to pry it open with a crowbar. Inside were old books, a rusted metal box, and what looked like a child's doll, its porcelain face cracked and eyes missing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, at least, that's what I told myself, but because the house started making noises. Every creak, groan, and thud felt louder than it should have been. Around 2 a.m., I swear I heard footsteps on the stairs. I grabbed a baseball bat and checked, but nothing was there. The next morning, Emma stopped by to check on me. I told her about the noises, and she laughed, saying, "It's an old house, Alex. Old houses make sounds." Still, she agreed to stay over that night just in case I freaked myself out again. Around midnight, we were watching TV when we heard a loud bang coming from the kitchen. We both froze. Emma whispered, "Did you lock the back door?" I nodded. Together, we crept into the kitchen, and I nearly screamed when I saw it. The doll from the cellar was sitting on the counter. Emma was convinced I was playing a prank, but I swear on my life, I had left that doll in the crate. We locked it in a box and put the box in the garage. That seemed to settle things for a few days. But then the dreams started. I began having vivid nightmares about a little girl crying in the cellar. In the dream, she would look up at me, and her face wasn't a face. It was just a smooth, featureless surface. I woke up drenched in sweat every night. Desperate for answers, I started digging into the house's history. I found out it was built in the 1890s and had been owned by the same family for 3 generations. The last owner, an elderly woman, had died in the house about 10 years ago. The records didn't say much else, but I did find an old newspaper clipping online about a missing child in the neighborhood from the 1950s. The article mentioned the house. One night, Mike came over to help me patch up some drywall. Around 10 p.m., while we were cleaning up, we heard scratching sounds coming from behind the walls. Rats, I said, though I wasn't convinced. We tore open the section of the wall where the noise was loudest, expecting to find a nest or something. Instead, we found another hidden compartment. Inside was a bundle of papers tied with string. The papers were old letters, all addressed to a Margaret and signed, "Yours forever, T." The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written by someone very old or very sick. One letter caught my attention. It said, "Margaret, I can't keep her down there much longer. She's getting stronger. If you find this, forgive me." Mike read over my shoulder and said, "Okay. Nope. I'm out." He left, and honestly, I don't blame him. Last night was the final straw. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of the front door slamming. I ran downstairs, and the door was wide open. My first thought was that someone had broken in, but nothing was missing. Then I noticed something chilling, muddy footprints leading from the front door to the hidden cellar door. I called Emma and begged her to come over. She agreed, but when she arrived, she brought a priest with her. I wasn't religious, but at that point, I was willing to try anything. The priest walked through the house, sprinkling holy water and saying prayers. When he got to the cellar, he stopped. "Something bad happened here," he said. "So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know if I'm dealing with a ghost, some kind of curse, or if I'm just losing my mind. What do you guys think? Should I sell the house? Burn it down? Call an exorcist? I'm open to any and all suggestions." I woke up the morning after the priest's visit feeling a bit more confident. Maybe it was the holy water, or maybe it was sheer exhaustion, but I was determined to push forward. This house, despite all its weirdness, was still my dream. I figured staying busy with renovations would keep my mind off the strange occurrences. Plus, I'd already sunk so much money into this place. $320,000 to buy it, and I'd set aside $40,000 to turn it into something beautiful. There was no going back now. I decided to tackle the kitchen and living room first. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Cracked tiles, those hideous dark green cabinets, and a fridge so old it looked like a relic from the Cold War. The living room wasn't much better, with its peeling wallpaper and a weird, uneven floor that sloped slightly to the left. My vision was clear, modern, stylish, but with rustic touches to honor the house's age. I'd do most of the work myself to save money, though I'd have to call in professionals for plumbing and electrical. On the first day, I focused on gutting the kitchen. Armed with a crowbar, I started prying off the cabinets. The first few came off easily, but when I got to the ones above the sink, I noticed something odd. One of the cabinets was bolted shut from the inside. That didn't make any sense. Cabinets don't lock from the inside, right? I grabbed a hammer and pried it open. Inside, there was a small wooden box, almost like a jewelry box. It had a faint smell of mildew and was covered in cobwebs. When I opened it, I found a bundle of old photographs. Most were black and white, showing a family that must have lived here decades ago. A man, a woman, and a little girl who looked to be about 6. But one photo was different. It was newer, in color, and showed the little girl standing in front of this very house. The weird part? She looked exactly the same as in the older photos. Same dress, same expression, same everything. I felt a chill run down my spine but told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe the photos were staged, or maybe I was overthinking it. I set the box aside and kept working. By the second day, I had most of the cabinets out and had started ripping up the tile. That's when I met Nate, a contractor who lived a few houses down. He came by to introduce himself, saying he'd noticed the dumpster in my driveway. Nate was a tall, burly guy in his 40s with a thick beard and a friendly demeanor. I was relieved to finally meet a neighbor who didn't think I was crazy. "You're doing all this yourself?" Nate asked, looking around the kitchen. "Trying to," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "But I might need help with some of the heavier stuff." "Tell you what," Nate said. "I've got some free time this week. If you need a hand, let me know." I can't stand seeing someone struggle through this kind of work alone. We exchanged numbers, and I felt a bit of relief. Maybe things were finally starting to look up. That night, I had another dream about the little girl. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at me with those blank, featureless eyes. When I woke up, I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed, drenched in sweat, with the sound of faint knocking echoing in the distance. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, but the knocking didn't stop. It was coming from inside the house. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously walked through the house, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. It seemed to be coming from the living room wall, the one I hadn't touched yet. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard it again. Soft, deliberate knocks, like someone tapping from the other side. The next morning, I decided to deal with the living room. I started by stripping the wallpaper, which peeled off in long, soggy strips. About halfway through, I noticed something etched into the plaster beneath the paper. It looked like writing, carved into the wall with something sharp. The words were jagged, uneven, and read. "She watches." I stepped back, heart pounding, but tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank from the previous owners. Or maybe some kid had done it years ago. Either way, I needed to get this wall fixed. I called Nate and asked if he could help me patch it up. Nate arrived that afternoon, and I showed him the writing. He didn't say much, just raised an eyebrow and muttered something about old houses being weird. We started tearing down the plaster to replace it with new drywall. That's when we found it, a hollow section in the wall. Inside was another box, this one larger than the one I'd found in the kitchen. It was locked, and the lock was rusted shut. "Looks like you've got yourself a mystery," Nate said, handing me the box. I pried it open later that night, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. There were more photographs, but these were even stranger. They showed the same little girl, but in each photo, her face was blurred out. Not just out of focus, blurred, like someone had deliberately smudged her face before the photo was developed. One photo showed her standing in the living room, right in front of where I'd found the box. The next day, I tried to focus on the renovations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I turned around, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Just shadows, I told myself. Just shadows. By the end of the week, I'd finished gutting the kitchen and had started installing new cabinets. Nate helped me with the heavy lifting, and we managed to get the upper cabinets in place without too much trouble. But when we started on the lower cabinets, things got weird again. As we were aligning one of the cabinets against the wall, Nate stopped and said, "Do you hear that?" I listened closely and heard a faint sound, like whispering. It seemed to be coming from behind the wall. "Probably just old pipes," I said, trying to convince myself as much as Nate. But Nate wasn't convinced. He grabbed a crowbar and pried off a section of the wall. Behind it, we found another small room, barely big enough for a person to stand in. The walls were covered in more writing, scratched into the wood. "Don't let her out." I stared at the writing, heart pounding. Nate looked at me and said, "You should sell this place, man." But I couldn't. I'd already sunk too much money into it, and besides, who would buy a house with this kind of history? I thanked Nate for his help and told him I'd take care of the rest myself. He left, but not before giving me a serious look and saying, "Be careful, Alex. Some things are better left alone." That night, the whispering started again, louder this time. It didn't stop until dawn. Now I'm sitting here, typing this out, wondering if I made a huge mistake buying this house. Every time I try to focus on the renovations, something happens to remind me that this place has secrets, dark, terrifying secrets. I don't know if I should keep going or cut my losses and leave. But one thing's for sure, this house isn't just old. It's something else entirely. When my family found out about the house, I thought their reaction would be excitement mixed with a bit of good-natured ribbing about me finally settling down with a place of my own. I wasn't ready for the whirlwind of chaos they brought with them. If there's one thing I've learned about my mom and sister, it's that they love helping in ways that almost always complicate things. And this time, they took it to a whole new level. It started innocently enough. Mom called me one evening while I was trying to sort out the backsplash for the kitchen. "Alex, honey, I heard from Molly that you bought a fixer-upper. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I could hear the excitement in her voice, and I made the mistake of thinking she'd just be happy for me. Sorry, Mom. It's been kind of hectic, I replied, hoping to keep the conversation short. But then came the dreaded words. Well, I'm coming over tomorrow to see it. And Molly wants to come too. The next day, they showed up armed with design magazines, sample books, and a level of enthusiasm I wasn't remotely prepared for. Mom was all over the living room the second she walked in, holding up swatches of floral wallpaper and gushing about how cozy it would make the space feel. Molly, on the other hand, zeroed in on the hallway, insisting that dark wood paneling would add a classic touch. I was too stunned to respond, so I just kind of nodded along, thinking it would stop there. Spoiler, it didn't. A few days later, I came home from a supply run to find a strange truck parked in my driveway. At first, I thought it was Nate, but when I walked inside, I was greeted by a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a clipboard in hand. Standing next to him were Mom and Molly, both looking far too pleased with themselves. Alex, this is Gary, Mom said brightly. He's a contractor. Molly and I thought it'd be good to get a professional's opinion on the renovations. I just stood there, speechless. A contractor? I didn't hire a contractor. Well, we did. Molly chimed in. You've been doing so much work on your own, and we thought you could use the help. Gary gave me an apologetic smile, like he knew he'd walked into a minefield. Don't worry, he said. We're just here to discuss options. Nothing's set in stone. But things moved quickly. Too quickly. Mom and Molly started talking over each other, rattling off their ideas for the house. Mom wanted the living room done in large floral wallpaper with matching drapes. Molly was pushing for a dark, wood-paneled hallway, complete with a built-in bookshelf. I tried to interrupt, but they steamrolled me, and before I knew it, Gary was taking measurements and jotting down notes. The next day, I found myself in a full-blown design intervention. Mom showed up with rolls of floral wallpaper and a catalog of Victorian-style furniture. Molly brought wood samples for the hallway and a Pinterest board full of inspiration. They were completely ignoring the fact that I'd already chosen a modern, rustic look for the house. I don't want floral wallpaper, I said firmly, trying to stand my ground. Oh, Alex, Mom said with a dismissive wave of her hand. You'll love it once it's up. It'll add so much character. And the dark wood paneling will give the hallway a really rich, timeless feel, Molly added. Trust me, it was like talking to a brick wall. They were so convinced they knew what was best for me and my house that they didn't care what I actually wanted. And then came the kicker. We've already booked Gary to start next week, Mom announced. What? I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. You hired him? Without even asking me? Well, we didn't think you'd mind, Molly said. You're so busy with everything else, and this way, you'll have professionals handling the big stuff. I was furious, but I didn't have the energy to argue. Between the strange happenings in the house and the stress of renovations, I felt like I was being pulled in a dozen different directions. So I let it slide, for now. When Gary and his crew arrived the following week, things got even weirder. While they were prepping the living room walls for the wallpaper, one of the workers called me over. Hey, man, you might want to see this, he said, pointing to the wall they just stripped. There, hidden beneath layers of old paint and wallpaper, was another message carved into the wood. This one read, "She'll make you stay." Gary looked at me, clearly unsettled. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I didn't have an answer, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted one. Meanwhile, Mom and Molly were blissfully unaware of the growing tension. They were too busy arguing over the exact shade of floral for the drapes. I tried to tell them about the message on the wall, but they brushed it off as old graffiti. Even Gary seemed eager to move past it, saying, "Let's just patch it up and get on with it." As the days went on, more strange things started happening. Tools would go missing, only to show up in completely different parts of the house. The floral wallpaper Mom had chosen kept peeling off, no matter how many times the crew tried to apply it. And then there were the noises, soft whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. One afternoon, while Gary was working on the hallway paneling, he called me over again. "Alex, you've got some weird stuff going on here," he said, holding up a plank of wood. On the back of the plank, Someone had scratched the words, "Don't let her out." Gary and his crew finished the living room and hallway as quickly as they could, but I could tell they were eager to be done with the house. When Gary handed me the final invoice, he said, "Look, man, I don't know what's going on here, but if I were you, I'd think twice about staying." After they left, I was left with a house that no longer felt like mine. The floral wallpaper in the living room and the dark wood paneling in the hallway felt suffocating, like the house itself was rejecting the changes. And then there was the matter of the messages we kept finding. Messages that no one wanted to acknowledge, but that I couldn't ignore. I tried to confront Mom and Molly about their interference, but they just brushed it off. "We're just trying to help," Mom said. "You'll thank us when it's all done." But I wasn't so sure, because no matter how much work we put into the house, it felt like something, or someone, didn't want us there. And the more we tried to make it ours, the more it felt like it was slipping away. After weeks of biting my tongue, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. My house, my first house, the place I'd poured my savings and dreams into, was slipping out of my control. Between Mom's floral explosion in the living room and Molly's obsession with making the hallway look like a haunted library, I felt like a stranger in my own home. And then there were the other things, the unexplainable ones. I was barely holding it together, and their meddling was making things worse. I needed to set some boundaries. I texted both Mom and Molly to come over for a family meeting. Mom responded immediately with a cheery, "Of course, honey." Molly's reply was more ominous. "Oh no, what now?" I didn't give them any details, just told them to be at the house by 7 p.m. I figured the element of surprise might help. When they arrived, I was already in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and rehearsing what I was going to say. I'd written down a few bullet points to keep myself from losing track or getting steamrolled. The second they walked in, though, I could tell it wasn't going to be easy. Mom was holding a bag of fabric samples, and Molly had a smug look that made me want to scream. "Alex, you've been so secretive lately," Mom chirped, setting the bag down on the counter. "I brought some new ideas for the curtains. I think you'll love them." Molly leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Yeah, what's this all about? We're not in trouble, are we?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Look, I wanted to talk to you both about the house. I appreciate all the help you've given me so far, but—" "Help?" Molly interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "You mean saving you from your terrible design choices?" I ignored her and kept going. "But this is my project. I bought this house. I've been planning this renovation for years, and I want it to reflect my vision, not yours." Mom looked genuinely hurt, which made me feel like a jerk, but I pushed through. "I know you're trying to help, but it's overwhelming. The floral wallpaper, the wood paneling, those aren't things I want. And when you hired Gary without asking me, that crossed a line." Molly rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Alex. You were floundering. We just gave you a little push." "A push," I said, my voice rising. "You steamrolled me. This is my house, and I feel like I'm not even allowed to make decisions anymore." There was a tense silence. Mom fidgeted with one of the fabric samples, and Molly looked like she was gearing up for another snarky comment. Before either of them could speak, I added, "From now on, I'm making all the decisions. No more wallpaper. No more paneling. No more contractors without my approval. This is my home, and I need you to respect that." Mom finally broke the silence. "Honey, we're just trying to make this place feel like a home. You're all alone here, and we don't want you to feel overwhelmed." "I get that," I said, softening my tone a little. "But this house already feels like something's off. I don't know how to explain it, but it doesn't feel like mine anymore. And I need to take that back." Molly snorted. "It's a house, Alex. It's not haunted, or whatever you're implying. You're just being dramatic." "Am I?" I shot back. "What about the messages we found? The missing tools? The noises at night? Are those just me being dramatic too?" Molly's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Old houses make noises. You're psyching yourself out." Before the argument could escalate further, Mom interjected. Okay, let's not fight. Molly, let's respect Alex's wishes. It's his house, after all." I felt a wave of relief, but then Mom added, "But what if we paid for some of the renovations? That way, we'd have a little more say in the design. $10,000, Alex. Think about what you could do with that. I stared at her, stunned. You're offering me money to let you take over the house? Not take over, Mom said quickly. Just contribute. We could make it something really special. No, I said firmly. I don't want your money. I don't want your wallpaper, or your paneling, or your contractors. I just want to do this my way. Molly let out an exaggerated sigh. Fine. But when this place looks like a Pinterest fail, don't come crying to us. Mom looked like she wanted to argue more, but she nodded reluctantly. Okay, honey, we'll back off. But if you need anything at all, you'll let us know, right? Of course, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I meant it. After they left, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. I'd finally stood my ground, but their reactions made it clear that this wasn't over. Molly's parting comment about the house looking like a Pinterest fail replayed in my head, and I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But I couldn't let them take over my house, not when I was already struggling to feel like it was mine. The next few days were quiet, and I took advantage of the solitude to get back to work. I focused on the kitchen, replacing the countertops and installing the new backsplash I'd picked out. It was slow, tedious work, but it felt good to make progress without anyone breathing down my neck. Then, one night, I heard it again, the knocking. It started faint, like before, but this time it didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like someone was pounding on the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound to the hallway, where the wood paneling Molly had insisted on was already starting to warp. I pressed my ear to the wall, and my blood ran cold. This time, the knocking was accompanied by a voice, faint, whispering, but unmistakable. It said, "Let me out." I stumbled back, heart racing. For a moment, I considered calling Mom or Molly, but I knew what they'd say. Molly would mock me, and Mom would try to take over again. This was my problem to deal with. The next day, I ripped out the warped paneling myself. Behind it, I found another message carved into the wall. She's waiting. I don't know who she is, and I don't want to find out. But now, more than ever, I need this house to feel like mine. If I can just push through the renovations and make it my own, maybe, just maybe, it'll start to feel like home. It started with the smallest things. After our family meeting, I thought I'd finally set some boundaries with Mom and Molly. I'd made it clear this was my house, my project, and I was going to do things my way. For a couple of weeks, it seemed like they'd gotten the message. But then, the unplanned visits began. One Saturday morning, I was in the middle of painting the kitchen cabinets when I heard a car pull up. I glanced out the window and saw Mom's SUV parked in the driveway. My stomach sank. She hadn't called, and I had no idea why she was here. Before I could even put down my paintbrush, the door swung open, and there she was, holding a box of decorative accents and wearing her signature determined expression. "Alex," she said, beaming. "I was at the home store, and I saw these adorable little curtains for the kitchen. They're pink floral, just a little pop of color. I thought they'd brighten up the space." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "we talked about this. No more surprises." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen. "They'll look amazing. You'll see." Before I could stop her, she'd unpacked the curtains and started hanging them over the kitchen window. I stood there, gripping the paintbrush, trying not to lose my temper. When she stepped back to admire her handiwork, I forced myself to look. They were hideous. The pink was an assault on the senses, and the floral pattern looked like something out of a 1950s catalog. "They're awful," I said bluntly. Mom gasped, clutching her chest like I just insulted her personally. "Alex, they're charming. You just need to give them a chance." I didn't argue. I knew from experience it wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I waited until she left, and within an hour, the curtains were down. I stuffed them back into the box and shoved it into the garage, hoping she wouldn't notice the next time she came over. But that was just the beginning. A few days later, I came home from a long day of work to find Molly sitting on the front porch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up as I approached, just waved her free hand and said, "About time you got here. I've been waiting for an hour." What are you doing here? I asked, fumbling with my keys. I wanted to see how the hallway was coming along, she said, standing up and brushing imaginary dust off her jeans. You're still keeping the paneling, right? No, I said flatly. I tore it out weeks ago. Her face fell. You what? Alex, that paneling was the best thing about this place. It was warped, I said, stepping inside. And I didn't like it. We've been over this. Molly followed me in, her voice rising with every word. You're making a huge mistake. This house needs character, not your half-baked minimalist aesthetic. It's boring, Alex. You're boring. I ignored her and headed to the kitchen, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. Instead, she made herself comfortable, pulling out her phone to show me pictures of better hallway designs. I let her talk, nodding occasionally, but I didn't agree to a single thing. When she finally left, she muttered something about how I'd regret ignoring her advice. I didn't care. I was too exhausted to argue. Then came the time they both showed up, together. It was a Sunday morning, and I was enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping coffee in the living room and scrolling through renovation ideas on my laptop. The knock on the door made me groan. I opened it to find Mom and Molly standing there, each holding an armful of decor items. Surprise, Mom said, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. We thought we'd help you spruce up the place. I wanted to scream. Instead, I plastered on a fake smile and stepped aside, letting them in. They wasted no time, heading straight for the living room. Mom started hanging a large floral painting above the fireplace, while Molly laid out an intricate rug that clashed horribly with the furniture I'd just bought. Stop, I said, my voice firm. I didn't ask for this. Oh, Alex, Mom said, waving me off. You'll thank us later. No, I won't, I snapped. This isn't your house. It's mine, and I want it to reflect my style, not yours. Molly crossed her arms, glaring at me. Your style sucks. This place looks like a sterile showroom. It needs warmth, personality. It needs you to leave it alone. I shot back. That was the final straw. I spent the next hour removing everything they'd added. The painting, the rug, even a set of throw pillows Mom had brought. By the time I was done, the living room looked like it had before their uninvited help, and I felt a small sense of victory. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, I woke up to find the floral curtains back in the kitchen. I stared at them, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. I hadn't put them back. Had Mom snuck in while I was asleep? The thought made my skin crawl. I called her immediately. Did you come over last night? What? No, of course not, she said, sounding genuinely confused. Why would you ask that? Because the curtains are back. There was a long pause. Well, maybe you put them back and forgot. I didn't, I said firmly. Mom, if you're coming over without telling me, you need to stop. I haven't been to the house since Sunday, she insisted. Maybe Molly. I hung up before she could finish. I didn't have the energy to deal with both of them. Instead, I took the curtains down again and stuffed them into the garage, this time making sure to hide the box under a pile of old tools. I wasn't taking any chances. The rest of the week was quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I half expected to see the curtains back on the window. At night, I started locking all the doors and windows, double-checking them before I went to bed. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't help it. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not because of Mom and Molly, but because of something else. Something I couldn't explain. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I heard them again. Soft, deliberate, moving through the hallway. I grabbed a flashlight and crept out of bed, my heart pounding. The house was silent, but the air felt heavy, charged. I checked every room, but there was nothing out of place. The doors and windows were still locked. The only thing I found was a faint, floral scent lingering in the kitchen, like the smell of the curtains. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The chaos didn't stop. I'd managed to fend off Mom and Molly's uninvited decorating spree, but the peace was short-lived. A few days later, Molly unleashed a whole new level of interference. I woke up one morning to find over 50 unread messages in the family group chat. At first, I thought it was the usual banter. Memes from my cousin Jin, Mom sending inspirational quotes, and Molly complaining about her neighbors. But when I opened the chat, my stomach sank. Molly had posted pictures of my house. Not just casual snapshots either. These were carefully staged photos, as if she were trying to show off her handiwork. There were shots of the living room with its bare walls, the kitchen mid-renovation, and even the hallway I'd torn apart after her disastrous paneling idea. She'd captioned each one with comments like, "Look at this blank canvas Alex calls a living room," and "He ripped out the paneling I chose." Can you believe it? The floodgates had opened. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years chimed in with their opinions. "Needs more color," Aunt Karen wrote, her text punctuated with a dozen heart emojis. "Darkwood paneling was a great idea, Molly. Why'd he take it down?" Uncle Rich added. "Why is it so empty?" asked my cousin Lisa, who lived over 1,000 miles away. By the time I scrolled to the bottom of the thread, it felt like everyone in the family had weighed in. Mom had, of course, added her 2 cents, defending the floral wallpaper she tried to impose on me. "He'll regret not listening to me," she wrote. "I raised him better than this." I closed the app, tossed my phone onto the couch, and rubbed my temples. It was one thing to deal with Mom and Molly in person, but now they'd weaponized the entire extended family. And for what? To criticize my house? My decisions? The next day, Molly escalated things even further. I caught her sneaking around the property while I was in the middle of repairing the kitchen sink. She didn't bother knocking this time. She just walked right in with her phone in hand. "What are you doing?" I snapped, glaring at her. "Relax," she said, grinning. "I'm just getting better angles for the group chat. Everyone wants updates." "Everyone? Or just you?" I shot back. "You don't live here, Molly. You don't get to barge in and treat this place like your personal project." "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're overreacting. I'm helping you." "Helping? By turning my house into a family debate forum?" She shrugged, as if she couldn't understand why I was upset. "Look, you're the one being difficult. If you'd just listened to us, this house wouldn't look like a prison cell." That was it. I'd had enough. "You need to leave," I said, my voice cold. "And if you or anyone else shows up here unannounced again, I'm calling the cops." For once, Molly looked genuinely taken aback. "Fine," she muttered, storming out. "But don't come crying to me when you ruin this place." After she left, I decided it was time to take action. I went online and ordered a security camera, a good one. It cost me $250, but it was worth every penny if it meant keeping Molly and the rest of the family at bay. The camera arrived 2 days later, and I spent the evening installing it. I placed it by the front door, making sure it had a clear view of the driveway and porch. It was motion-activated, with live alerts sent straight to my phone. The first night with the camera was uneventful, and I finally got a decent night's sleep. But the following morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. "Motion detected." My heart sank as I opened the app. The footage showed Molly standing on the porch, staring directly at the camera. She didn't knock or ring the bell. She just stood there for a few minutes, then left. The next day, the camera picked up another visitor. This time, it was Mom. She didn't try to come inside, either. She just stood in the driveway, holding a box of what looked like more decor items. After a while, she got back in her car and drove off. By the third day, I was starting to feel like I was being stalked. Every time the camera sent me an alert, my anxiety spiked. Most of the footage was harmless. Delivery drivers, neighborhood kids on bikes. But occasionally, it was a family member, lurking outside like they couldn't accept that I didn't want them involved anymore. Then, late one night, the camera captured something I couldn't explain. It was around 3 a.m. when my phone buzzed with an alert. Groggy, I opened the app to check the footage. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the empty porch and the faint glow of the streetlights. But then I noticed movement in the corner of the frame. A shadow, flitting across the edge of the yard. I replayed the footage several times, but I couldn't make out what it was. It didn't look like a person or an animal. It was just a shadow. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, maybe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next morning, I called Nate, the contractor who'd helped me earlier in the renovation. I didn't tell him about the shadow. I just said I needed advice on securing the house. He suggested adding more cameras and maybe even a fence around the property. I decided to take his advice. Over the next few days, I installed 2 more cameras, one overlooking the backyard and another pointed at the garage. I also started locking the gate leading to the yard. Despite all this, the family drama didn't stop. Molly continued to post updates in the group chat, using old photos she'd taken during her visits. One particularly infuriating post showed the floral curtains Mom had tried to install, with a caption that read, "Alex doesn't appreciate Mom's taste. What do you all think?" The responses were predictably infuriating. "Those curtains are adorable. Alex needs to lighten up. He's so ungrateful." I resisted the urge to reply. Engaging would only make things worse. Instead, I muted the chat and focused on finishing the kitchen. I installed new countertops, painted the cabinets, and added a sleek, modern backsplash. It was finally starting to look the way I'd envisioned, clean, stylish, and uniquely mine. But the strange occurrences continued. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a long day of work, I heard a faint knock at the front door. When I checked the camera, there was no one there, just the empty porch. A few minutes later, the knocking came again, louder this time. I opened the door, half expecting to see Molly or Mom, but the street was deserted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the cameras, waiting for another alert. But the footage showed nothing out of the ordinary. No visitors, no shadows, just the stillness of the night. Whatever was happening, it wasn't something I could capture on camera. The family's meddling had been annoying, but now it felt like the house itself was conspiring against me. Every time I thought I'd regained control, something new would happen to remind me that I wasn't really in charge. Whether it was uninvited guests, inexplicable shadows, or the persistent sense of being watched, I couldn't shake the feeling that this house wasn't just a renovation project. It was something much darker, and I was starting to wonder if I'd ever truly make it mine. Finishing the kitchen felt like crossing a finish line after running a marathon. It had taken weeks of sweat, sleepless nights, and navigating through an endless maze of family drama, but it was finally done. The cabinets gleamed in their crisp white finish, the stainless steel appliances reflected the soft under-cabinet lighting, and the subway tile backsplash tied everything together with a modern yet timeless look. For the first time since I moved in, I felt like I'd reclaimed a part of the house as mine. The bathroom was next. It was smaller, but just as much of a headache. The old fixtures were an eyesore: chipped porcelain sink, stained bathtub, and cracked tiles that seemed to mock me every time I stepped in there. I ripped everything out with a mix of determination and frustration. The demolition revealed some troubling surprises: outdated plumbing, rotting floorboards, and even a family of mice that had taken up residence behind the vanity. I called Nate to help with the plumbing and hired an exterminator to deal with the uninvited tenants. Once the structural issues were resolved, I got to work installing a sleek new vanity with a quartz countertop, a frameless glass shower, and matte black fixtures that added a touch of elegance. The new tiles were a light gray with subtle veining, making the space feel larger and more inviting. By the time I finished, it looked like something out of a home renovation show, and I couldn't stop staring at it. Throughout all this, I kept the updates to myself. No pictures in the family group chat, no casual mentions during phone calls. I didn't want Mom or Molly barging in with unsolicited advice or trying to help by adding their own touches. The only people who got to see the progress were my friends and neighbors. One evening, my neighbor Nate came over to check out the finished kitchen. He walked in, looked around, and let out a low whistle. "Man, this is incredible," he said, running a hand along the countertop. "You've done a hell of a job." "Thanks," I said, feeling a rare moment of pride. "It's been a process, but I'm happy with how it's turning out." "You should be. This place looked like a time capsule when you moved in. Now it feels like a real home." That word, home, hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so much time fighting for control over this house, trying to make it my own, and now it finally felt like I was getting somewhere. Encouraged by the progress, I decided to tackle the floors next. The old ones were a mix of scratched hardwood and dingy carpet that had seen better days. I'd been saving for this part of the renovation, knowing it would be one of the most transformative changes. I splurged on $8,000 oak flooring, light, natural planks that would brighten up the entire house. The installation was a marathon. I spent 2 full weekends ripping out the old floors and prepping the subfloor. Nate offered to help with the heavy lifting, and together we managed to get all the new planks laid down. The moment we finished, I stood back and looked at the transformation. The oak floors brought a warmth and cohesion to the house that it had been missing. It was like the place had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment to finally exhale. The walls were the last step. I'd gone back and forth on colors, but in the end, I decided to keep it simple. Neutral tones that would complement the floors and make the rooms feel open and airy. Painting was tedious, but there was something satisfying about watching the old, dingy walls disappear under fresh coats of cream and soft gray. When it was all done, the house felt completely different. The kitchen was bright and modern, the bathroom was sleek and luxurious, and the new floors tied everything together. For the first time, I felt like I could truly call this place my home. My friends were just as impressed as Nate. Sarah, a coworker who'd been cheering me on throughout the renovation process, stopped by one evening to see the progress. She walked through the house, her eyes wide with admiration. "Alex, this is amazing," she said, pausing in the kitchen to take it all in. "I can't believe how much you've done." "It's been a journey," I admitted, "but I'm finally starting to feel like it's coming together." She smiled. "You should be proud. Not everyone could pull this off." Even my other neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who rarely spoke to anyone, stopped by to compliment the new floors. "They look beautiful," she said, her voice warm for the first time since I'd met her. "You've really brought new life to this old house." But the house wasn't done reminding me of its quirks. A week after finishing the renovations, I was sitting in the kitchen, enjoying a quiet evening, when the security camera sent a motion alert to my phone. I opened the app, expecting to see a stray cat or a delivery truck. Instead, I saw the shadow again, the same one that had appeared on the footage weeks earlier. It flickered across the driveway, then disappeared. My stomach tightened as I rewound the footage and played it again. The shadow was there, unmistakable, but there was nothing to cast it. The streetlights were on, and the area was empty. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The house was silent, but the unease lingered. I'd done everything I could to make this place my own, but it felt like something was still holding on, resisting the changes. It wasn't just the memories of Mom and Molly's interference or the messages we'd found carved into the walls. It was something deeper, something I couldn't explain. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about everything the house had been through. Its history, its secrets, and now, its transformation. I'd poured so much of myself into this place, and yet it felt like the house had its own story to tell, one that didn't include me. The next morning, I woke up to find a bouquet of flowers on the front porch. There was no note, no sign of who had left them. The flowers were pink and white, arranged in a way that reminded me of the floral curtains Mom had tried to hang in the kitchen. I stared at them for a long time before finally picking them up and bringing them inside. The renovations might have been a success, but the house still had its mysteries. And as much as I wanted to believe I'd finally taken control, there was a part of me that wondered if the house had let me win this round, or if it was just waiting for the next move. When the day of the final meeting with my family arrived, I had mixed feelings. On one hand, I was proud of what I'd accomplished. The house looked better than I ever imagined it could. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure how Mom and Molly would react. They had spent so much time pushing their own ideas that I wondered if they'd appreciate my vision, or if they'd nitpick every detail until my excitement drained away. The morning of their visit, I spent hours tidying up, making sure everything was spotless. The new oak floors gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the large windows. The kitchen was a vision of modern simplicity, with its white cabinets and polished countertops. The bathroom, with its sleek gray tiles and matte black fixtures, felt like a tiny spa. Even the living room, where I'd chosen neutral tones and minimal decor, looked cozy and inviting. By the time they arrived, I'd managed to calm my nerves. Mom's SUV pulled into the driveway first, followed by Molly's compact car. I stepped outside to greet them, and as soon as they got out, I could see the surprise on their faces. "Oh my gosh," Mom said, her hand flying to her mouth. "Alex, this is beautiful." Molly stood frozen for a moment, her eyebrows raised. Then she smirked. "Wow, you actually pulled it off." I smiled, feeling a rare sense of validation. "Come inside. There's a lot to see." As soon as they walked through the front door, Mom gasped. "The floors!" she exclaimed, bending down to touch the polished oak. "These are stunning. How did you afford this?" "I saved for them," I said simply. "They were the last big project I tackled." Molly ran her hand along the smooth wall in the hallway. "And you painted everything yourself?" "Yep," I replied, trying not to sound too smug. "Every room." When we got to the kitchen, Mom's jaw dropped. "Alex, this is incredible. I can't believe it. You kept it so clean and modern, but it still feels warm. See? This is why I didn't need floral curtains," I said, shooting her a playful look. Mom laughed, shaking her head. "I'll admit it, I was wrong. You've done an amazing job. This looks like something out of a magazine." Molly walked over to the island and leaned against it, giving me a mock glare. "Okay, fine. I was wrong too. Happy? You clearly didn't need my paneling ideas. But I still think it would have looked cool." I chuckled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, it felt like they were genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished instead of trying to impose their own ideas. The tour continued through the house. In the bathroom, Mom admired the glass shower and the elegant fixtures. "This is so classy, Alex," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I'm impressed." Even Molly couldn't find much to criticize. "The tiles are nice," she admitted. "Simple, but it works." By the time we made it to the living room, I felt like I'd passed some kind of test. They both settled onto the couch, and Mom turned to me with a soft smile. "You've really turned this house into something special. It's beautiful, Alex. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. Molly leaned back, crossing her arms. "Okay, fine. I'll say it. You were right, and we should have trusted you from the beginning. Happy now?" "Very," I said, grinning. We spent the next hour sitting in the living room, reminiscing about the chaos of the renovation process. Mom apologized for pushing her floral wallpaper ideas, and Molly admitted that she might have been a little too critical. It was a rare moment of honesty and connection, and I found myself genuinely enjoying their company for the first time in months. But the moment wasn't without its hiccups. As we were talking, Mom's gaze drifted to the corner of the room, where a faint shadow flickered against the wall. "What's that?" she asked, tilting her head. I glanced over, my stomach tightening. The shadow was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Probably just a tree outside," I said quickly, trying to brush it off. Molly squinted at it, then shrugged. "Old houses always have quirks. It gives it character." The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake the unease. I'd worked so hard to transform this house, to make it feel like mine, but there were still moments when it felt like something was watching, waiting. As Mom and Molly were getting ready to leave, Mom hugged me tightly. "You've done a wonderful job, Alex. I can't wait to see what you do next." "Thanks, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "But I think I'm done for a while. I need a break." Molly laughed. "Fair enough. Just don't forget to invite us to the housewarming party." After they left, I stood in the doorway, watching their cars disappear down the street. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Lighter, more peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd won. The house was finally mine, and my family had seen it for what it was, a reflection of me, not their ideas or expectations. But as I closed the door and turned off the lights, I caught a glimpse of the shadow again, flickering at the edge of the hallway. This time, I didn't look away. I stared at it, daring it to do something, to prove that it was more than just a trick of the light. It didn't move. It didn't vanish. It just lingered, as if it was waiting for something I couldn't yet understand.